Portrait photographers often use backdrops to minimize distractions behind the subject. And that's what I was doing here when I was photographing my daughter, Elsie. She was just goofing around. And you can see I have a backdrop here. It's a piece of plywood, and it's covering up all of the stuff in our garage, except there's some gaps on the edges. And sometimes with the edges, we'll have issues with our backdrops, or there may be an issue on the backdrop itself. How can we improve those areas? Well, one way is to work with the patch tool. Let me show you how that works. Here, I'll click and drag the background layer down to the new layer icon to duplicate that layer. Then double-click the layer name, and I'll call this one Patch. Next step is to make a selection of a problem area. And you can make the selection with your patch tool right here. With the patch tool, you have a few options. We'll work with normal here. So go ahead and select normal from this pull-down menu. And then just click and drag around the outer edge of your photograph. You want to make sure that you get all the way around the object or the problem, whatever it is. Then go back to where you started, and that will create a selection. Now, up top, one of the options we have is diffusion. With a low diffusion value, that means you'll see a more defined edge. With a high diffusion value, it will be a little bit softer. So with backdrops, typically you want a higher value there. And then you just click and drag this over to a good source area and let go. And what it does is it patches over whatever was there. And we can do this multiple times. If there's a little bit of a seam right here that I want to get rid of, I'll click and drag over that, move to a nice source area, and let go. Now, when you're working on areas of your image, if you have an area selected, and if you change your diffusion value to something low like this, and you go to an area where you have a different brightness value, take a look at what will happen. What can happen is that we have this really defined edge. Can you see that right there? That doesn't look very good. So I'll undo that. Here, let me do the same exact thing with a high diffusion value over here to this bright area. And what we'll see is even though the brightness value is different, that edge is a little bit more hidden. Now, that being said, you typically want to try to select an area which is similar. So if we want to clean up this little shadow that I have right there, we would want to use a higher diffusion value, go up to an area which has similar brightness value, and that way we can clean that up. You can also find little blemishes on your background and clean those up as well. So just go ahead and select those and then drag to that new area. With this side over here, I'll make one big selection over here and then a high diffusion value, click and drag over to another area and let go, and that can allow us to improve that. Often what I find with the patch tool is that it's helpful to do this multiple times. You're going over one area, you find a little problem, you go over it again, until you patch it up and make that background look really nice. In this way, we went from something which was not even really usable. It was kind of cluttered. We could see all of those other things in the background to something that's nice and clean and simple. And we did that without a lot of effort because we worked on a new layer and we worked with the patch tool. And we've also started to understand how we can use that diffusion slider in order to achieve the best results.